So we know that the first part of the day is how we wake up, and we know that we can advance our body clock by bright light exposure and moderate exercise in the morning. And here the light exposure is very important. So having jogging in the morning in sunglasses maybe is not the best, because the light has an important role in the morning. The other way how to advance our body clock to help wake up is the opposite, to help to wear sunglasses maybe in the evening or in the early afternoon, the late afternoon hours, or melatonin can be used in the early evening to tell the body that the dark phase will come sooner than we got used to. But we have to be careful with the morning exercise, which was shown in the movie. And here is a nice body rhythm test, a very simply body rhythm test, which I show you where to find that on the. It's again BBC's page actually. Four very simple questions. If you answer, very subjective questions actually. You just have to answer them based on your experiences, and it will match these answers with statistical data, with databases, and it will return the daily rhythm of your wake sleep pattern. So the first question is, how do you feel? You are a morning person or a night person? Yes, please. Yes. Here it is. So this is the internet address. Okay. I won't ask you now to answer this, but that's quite funny how different we are actually. So the first question, let's go back to the first question. Do you consider yourself a morning person or an evening person? And the 5 options are evening, more evening than morning, can't tell, more morning than evening, or morning. So the next question, at what time of day do you feel at your best? Again, a subjective question actually. Third question, considering your own feeling best rhythm, if you were entirely free to plan your day, at what time would you go to bed? And the fourth question, considering the same with waking up actually, so considering only your own feeling best rhythm, if you were entirely free to plan your day, at what time would you get up? Here we have only 3 options.
Wakes me up.
And if you give these answers, it just returns you a pattern based on your subjective answers. What is a typical sleep-wake pattern of those who answer similar like you? And here we see this is my pattern, what I answered for myself. What is apparent in the wakeness rhythm, that there are 2 peaks. So actually around, so in the afternoon there is a dip in the alertness, which we had a talk about in the movie, which is not just because we are after lunch, so not because the blood is distributed differently after lunch, but this is run by the body clock, the different alertness pattern actually. Because there is so big differences of alertness throughout the 24 hours, this is a real problem, of course, for shift workers and how to schedule shift workers. Now there are already companies specialized on advising big companies how to schedule the shifts for the workers. And the biggest one is the company is the Circadian, called Circadian. Come, I just show you the how it looks like the homepage. And there you can also find very practical ideas which are important in the health of the employees and which are important for shift workers. Of course, those working in healthcare know pretty well what impact it has on work performance to be on shift work. So here you can see many industries have the need of proper scheduling of the workforce, actually. And here are the key benefits of a proper scheduling. So that's you can check on your own. And now, quite funny article entitled "Learning to Live on a Mars Day." Probably you know that there are plans on doing some research on Mars, but we know that the life, the one day is a bit longer on Mars than on the Earth, and there is there has been a simulation conducted on the working schedules on Mars-like day, which is only about 40 minutes longer than the day on Earth. And this 40 minutes longer schedule is still enough to cause so-called circadian misalignment, so desynchronizing the body clock actually. So the researchers who were monitoring those devices which have been sent there throughout the 24 hours and 40 minutes, they did that for several days and weeks, of course, and they had complaints that this task is quite exhausting, and they then made an experiment on trying to synchronize their body clock to this new day schedule with properly timed lightning and properly timed tasks throughout this new period time. And at the end, they have found that here we can read that with red underlinings. Okay, that the main sleep duration was 6 hours, but fell to 5 hours when misaligned. So there was difference in the mean sleep hours as well. Self-report levels of fatigue and sleepiness also significantly increased when work was scheduled at an inappropriate circadian phase. So only this small difference of 40 minutes longer periodicity, if people are not aware of, this can disrupt our daily or body clock and cause symptoms. But of course, that's a very rare situation. We are not planning to go to the Mars. But the other thing is the term social jet lag, which many of us can suffer from that. What does it mean? It means that our work days are scheduled so that somehow we can't sleep enough during our work days, and therefore our weekend days will have a different sleep-wake pattern just to get on with our sleep deficient stage. So that means we have different schedule during the weekdays and different schedule during the weekends as from the aspect of sleep-wakefulness pattern. And this actually may force our body to regularly to align to different schedule, which can cause, which may lead to some problems. We will talk about later on that as well. Then we had the morning and noon part with the sympathetic activation and the peak cortisol levels, which is the most risky for cardiovascular diseases. Then here we had about the naps, the talk, and then here we had the stop of the streaming, the best time for exercise. What are these important physiological parameters which allow us to work the best here in exercise? The body temperature is the highest, allowing the best metabolic condition for muscle work. And also the mechanical features of these tissues are the best, the less chance for injury. And the hormonal rhythms are also optimal for that part. And also the blood vessels are less stiff, so blood pressure can decrease after exercise much quicker than after exercise in the morning. And the evening is the most relaxed time, and that's also because of the hormonal changes. The cortisol levels decrease, melatonin levels increase, body temperature starts to decrease, and the most important part is the physiological and mental load of the day is over by that time, and that's the best time for socialization, to talk, to have family gatherings, to discuss some problems. The best atmosphere for that. And here for the night is for sleep. So the body has prepared for sleep before that, including the metabolic program as well. We have completely different metabolic program during the night compared to during the day, which means also reduced glucose tolerance during this period. And that is the cause why what we have learned for our grandparents, that we have to eat the least for dinner and the most for the breakfast, because our body rhythm in metabolism is not set for digestion for the night. And here one sentence here below. Statistics have shown that that sleep deprivation is actually the same risk as drinking alcohol. So recent studies have shown that this is a very overseen problem. People are aware of not drinking alcohol before driving, but actually one night without sleep is equivalent with drinking 1 glass of beer or 2 glasses of beers. So as from the aspect of cognitive functions, the very same effect on the brain, and that is what is actually we are not yet aware of, but this is the very same effect. So summarizing who are those who have problems with running a healthy clock. So let's see the question of age. We know that babies in the uterus follow the daily rhythm of the mother because of the hormonal rhythms of the mother pass through the placenta and get to the this information is actually the daily rhythmic information is to synchronize the baby's rhythms. But then also after in the postnatal period, we know that the sleep pattern is not regular. So that's just because the neurobehavioral development but then later on in the period of before adolescence, of course the family's schedule is very important. But then we heard in the movie that the teenagers, because of the shifts in the hormonal status, because of the increased psychological and mental load, we have to have them to understand how to synchronize their own body clock. So we have to be very careful with teenagers. Maybe we should try to have them to advance the body clock, maybe not letting them sleeping every day longer than the school starts, but somehow those tools which we can learn from circadian biology, how to advance the body clock, this can help also for them with time. And here it's very important to allowing the weekend sleep days to carry on with to reduce the sleep deficiency they collected during the week. Adults have the best ability to cope with the increased sleep deficiencies, and then elderly is another affected group who have on one side aging in their visual system, so less light gets in actually, which could synchronize their body clock, and there studies have been done which where they increase the light patterns, the light intensity of the rooms where they were living, and they have found after several years, so during several years of observation, that their mood and also their activity was much improved. Yeah. And what can we do with this knowledge? So, for prevention, outreach activities and public education is important about the existence of this function of our body. Then we have to care about this function of the body for the best performance schedule to find. And here we have so Adventists, we have a special weekly pattern. So we have an active Sabbath. Usually we just not use this weekend to carry on with sleep deficiency. But sometimes this is also a problem for those who are maybe sometimes overloaded with Sabbath related tasks, and they work during the week a lot, and then also for the preparations of Sabbath they just don't have rest. So we have to be careful with this to see the whole week patterns of each individual, each of our friends. And now, what part of this knowledge can be used in therapy? I'm just summarizing some points. So if there are some symptoms and we think that it may be related to the body clock, of course, the specialist has to see the symptoms. So what are the conditions? So sleep problems, insomnia, there are good specialists, the neurologists, who can deal with this. Or mood disorders, or high blood pressure, and the metabolic disorders. For these all, we have very good profession who have to differentiate between symptoms. If this is another type of disease which causes a symptom, or just because of the wrong daily schedule is the cause. What in general we can say that shifting to a normal synchronized lifestyle may be helpful, but is maybe not enough to treat clinical conditions. So this knowledge is not enough to use for treatment, of course. So we have to see that in complex. Therefore, we have to have contact with the professionals of healthcare. But what is important, and the recent science shows that the quality of life can be changed with the knowledge and with the application of this knowledge. And of course, it does matter when during the day you take the medications which have been prescribed. So there are well-established syndromes or diseases where, because of the daily rhythm of, for example, the liver function or liver detoxification function or pharmacodynamics, it's very important to consider those times which the doctors have prescribed. And now, in the last part of the workshop, I would like to present some scientific data about the links of the body clock with metabolic syndrome, cancer, and depression. I would like to ask if we should do a break now again. Okay, so we do a break now, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. So we go on now with the links with clinical conditions. We start now with this pattern of the daily rhythmicity. So we can see that the rhythmicity can be shifted by external or some so-called Zeitgeber stimuli, which is used in research. This is just simply those factors which can reset the clock, reset the face of the body clock. These are most typically the light, temperature, food intake, exercise, sleep, social interactions, etc. So there are many factors which can influence the face of our rhythmicity. The term chronodisruption is used for those stages when somehow the external stimuli are not in phase with our inner rhythmicity, either at biochemical level, at tissue level, or physiological, hormonal level, or at behavioral rhythms like sleep-wake patterns. So the most typical conditions are, chronodisruptory conditions are the acute stage of jet lag, which you have probably experienced after traveling through several time zones, when the external time of lightning has changed, but maybe you want to stick to your sleep needs, or you want to stick to your meal habits, and if you do that, if you don't follow the destination time, but you want to keep your origin time, then you will have severe problems with your physiology. So the best advice in this case is to stick to the new time as soon as possible, or prepare for that in advance with advancing or delaying your body clock with properly timed meals and lightnings. The other one is shift work, which is a chronic problem, of course, where the external loads or external zeitgebers come not every day the same, but in more or less regular intervals, they force the body to shift the circadian rhythms. And the other one, which I have already talked about, is a social jet lag, which means our weekdays load, our weekdays wake sleep pattern are different from weekend patterns because of the different, either because of our different genetics or because of the occupation. And this can also be a load on circadian physiology. What are the consequences of this circadian misalignment or chronodisruption on the metabolic part of physiology? We know that all of the important tissues which are involved in the regulation of metabolism, so liver, skeletal muscle, adipose tissue, pancreas, they all have their own molecular clocks in their cells. These clocks are entrainable by the suprachiasmatic nucleus signals, so the autonomic nervous system. So actually, all of these tissues have autonomic innervation, or at least for the liver and pancreas, we know that they have direct autonomic innervation as well. And of course, hormonal regulation through the suprachiasmatic nucleus, because that regulates important endocrine glands, for example, the pineal gland, which produces melatonin, and the suprarenal gland, which produces the cortisol. And all of these tissues have receptors for these hormones and sense the daily pattern of the changing of these levels of these hormones. And these tissues are, and the rhythms in these tissues are entrained not only by the outputs of the SCN, but also directly by metabolic loads, which means simply the food intake time. So when we have our meals, if it is regular, if the schedule of food intake, or if the schedule of our meals is regular or irregular, is very important. And also temperature has a direct biochemical effect on the cells of these tissues. So at the end effect, we have a daily rhythmic pattern of different biochemical and the different metabolic processes like glucose metabolism, lipid metabolism, mitochondrial oxidation, insulin secretion. So studies have been carried out on human who were exposed to different light-dark schedules to do an experimental jet lag or experimental circadian misalignment. And here we can see that in this experiment, the subject stayed time blinded in the respiration chamber during 3 light and trained circadian cycles that resulted in the phase advance that means 21-hour periodicities 3 times, or phase delay with 27 hours, so 3 hours longer periodicities compared to controls. And then different metabolic parameters have been measured. And the main effect of this circadian misalignment, either phase advance or phase delay, is a concomitant disturbance of the glucose insulin metabolism and substrate oxidation. So there was measurable effect on the metabolic system of the glucose insulin metabolism. In another study, similar study, where the participants have been scheduled to a 28 hours periodicity, which means every day 4 hours longer than the normal 24 hours periodicity. And this means simply that a 1 week period comprises about only 6 days of 28 hours period. And in these participants, they measured the levels of important hormones regulating metabolism, like leptin. And they have found that the short-term circadian misalignment, so throughout this 1 week, similar to that which occurs with jet lag and chronically with shift work, results in systemic increases in postprandial glucose, insulin, and mean arterial pressure, systemic decreases in leptin and sleep efficiency, and the complete inversion of the cortisol profile across the behavioral cycle. So here in the middle of that cycle, actually for cortisol level, because cortisol follows the behavioral rhythm, but other hormones, for example, melatonin, follow the light-dark rhythm. But here you can see that in the middle of this 1 week period, the leptin shows different pattern compared to the first day and the last day.
Can you say it in simple words?
Yeah. This means that the hormonal pattern can change significantly if the period length is changed throughout 1 week period. So the acute change of the period length of the external stimuli affects the metabolism of the metabolic system. Yeah, and the abnormally high cortisol at the end of the wake episode and beginning of the sleep episode, when misaligned, could contribute to insulin resistance and hyperglycemia. So decreased leptin stimulates appetite and decreases energy expenditure, which is maintained chronically, could contribute to the development of obesity. Could contribute. Yeah. The next study, it was a bit longer, 3 weeks long study, where the sleep restriction has been done combined with circadian disruption. Again, 24-hour days were recurring. And in this study, exposure to prolonged sleep restriction with concurrent circadian disruption decreased the participants' resting metabolic rate and increased plasma glucose concentrations after meal. So they concluded that the prolonged sleep restriction with concurrent circadian disruption alters metabolism and could increase the risk of obesity and diabetes. And what is may be more important for us, because the very small proportion of the population have to work in shift works. About in some studies, it is estimated that approximately 10 or 20% of the population is somehow related or somehow involved in shift work. But it's a more frequent problem is social jet lag, which actually quantifies the discrepancy that often arises between circadian and social clocks, which results in chronic sleep loss. And here they report the results from a large-scale epidemiological study showing that beyond sleep duration, social jet lag is associated with increased BMI. Our results demonstrate that living against the clock may be a factor contributing to the epidemic of obesity. The next study was a study conducted longer ago, so on kids, on children, in the States. So this, we see the prevalence of overweight among the US children. You are probably familiar with this data. We know that the number of overweight kids is increasing in the States for sure. And we also know that the amount of sleep these kids have has been also reduced in the last decade significantly. So according to some studies, the average is around 6.5 hours per day, or around 7, which should be at least 1.5 or 2 hours longer. And several studies have been carried out here to investigate the association of sleep duration and obesity in kids and also in adults, which is well known now that there exists a clear association between the two. From this number of studies, 7 studies, all 7 has found a positive association between the sleep amount and obesity. And also in adults, 25 studies out of the 30 studies revealed this association between sleep amount and obesity. And recent studies have shown that not just the amount of sleep is linked to obesity, but also the pattern of sleep, the regularity of sleep. So those kids who have a regular sleep pattern, they go to bed every day the same time, and maybe they sleep less, but there is a regular pattern in the sleep. They are not obese, or they are not prone for obesity as much as those who maybe sleep more, but there is a very irregular pattern in sleep. So after the discovery of clock genes, many studies have been carried about the association of some alleles of clock genes with obesity, and these studies have revealed that these are animal studies. So after discoveries of the clock genes, many genetically manipulated mice have been generated to see the effect of loss of some components of this molecular clock. And these are listed in here. What we can see that, for example, the protein clock, if it is not working, then the attenuated feeding rhythm is observed. Obesity, hyperphagy, hyperlipidemia, hyperglycemia, hepatic steatosis, and hyperinsulinemia is present in these mice. For BML1, this is another very important clock gene. There is an apparent glucose intolerance, hyperinsulinemia, and so on. And if this gene is knocked out only in the liver, then okay, we will see when it's plugged in. So then it's also affected. So the glucose metabolism is also affected, and also in those other clock genes which have been listed, almost all of these components in the knockout mice, we see some kind of changes in the metabolism. Okay. So in the next study, in this experiment, they have constructed mice where the clock gene BML1 was knocked out only in the pancreatic cells, and in this mouse, in these mice, there was a loss of glucose-stimulated insulin secretion observed. So in the absence of this gene, there was no insulin, no glucose-stimulated insulin secretion, and they have found that with this genotype, loss of glucose-stimulated insulin secretion was due to accumulation of reactive oxygen species and consequent mitochondrial uncoupling. So there was a kind of metabolic disturbance in the pancreatic beta cells, which needed the function of BMAL1 to work properly. And the key study in this question was published last year, where time-restricted feeding was applied on the laboratory animals, which means in one group the animals were fed. So they had two animal groups. Both animal groups were on a high-fat diet, but the difference was only in timing. So one group had access to this high-fat diet at any time of the day, and the other group of animals, the access was restricted to a time window. And what they have found that mice under time restriction consume equivalent calories from the high-fat diet as those with not limited access, yet are protected against obesity. So even these animals had the same high-fat diet, they did not develop obesity because of time administration of the same high-fat diet. And this means that only the timing can be enough to influence the metabolic regulation. So the energy uptake and how the energy which was taken up in food will be utilized. So the conclusion of these studies on the connection between body clock and obesity is that when to eat or what to eat, if we have to face this question, maybe when to eat is more important. The next topic is the relation of the body clock with cancer. We know that from epidemiological data that shift workers have a higher risk on many cancer types. So especially breast cancer and prostate cancer, they are a risk group. Many studies have been conducted on this question. So about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or that actually these studies have been summarized and led to categorizing shift work as a carcinogenic factor by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. This is in behalf of the WHO, actually, this organization who estimates the factors which can lead or can be related to cancer formation. Actually, so the category is probably carcinogenic to humans. This category is in the same category as many chemical components, or if maybe I'm not wrong, smoking was also in the same category. And the other studies were about breast cancer and so many studies have been already done here about the association of shift work with the cancer incidence. And then after the discovery of the clock genes, the genomes could be investigated, and some alleles and some gene variants have been associated with a higher incidence of different tumor types. So here we can see the effects. Here we can see the findings of for different clock genes that in different tumor types they work a little bit different. They have different expression levels. It's, again, many studies have been carried out in this question. Some animal studies about the role of these clock genes which run the circadian clock and the tumor formation in this study, the BML clock gene was knocked out in mice, and the animals were exposed to radiation, so ionizing radiation. And here we can see the survival graphs that those heterozygotic for the clock gene plus the ionizing radiation had the lowest survival. And this was done also with another clock gene PER2, where we see again the lowest survival with the, here we have a homozygotic knockout animal with irradiation. The other factor is to test the shift work paradigm in these mice. So mice which were exposed to ionizing radiation plus a light-dark schedule which regularly shifts, so actually a shift work schedule was applied for these mice, that caused a more dramatic decrease in survival. So that meant they were wild type mice, so with normal genetic background, but simply exposing a shift work type of lightning schedule decreased dramatically the survival. And then combining these with different genotypes, we can see the worst with phase shift and irradiation together in the molecularly compromised clock-bearing mice. And in the last row, we can see a very well-known protein P53, which is a tumor suppressor protein. In those mice which don't have this protein have a very high incidence for tumor formation, because this protein is so-called safeguarding the cells of growing to tumors. So in these mice, it was compared the effect of the lack of P53 together with lack of the presence of clock genes. And again, you can see that the worst situation was where both genes were missing. And then in this graph, only P53 and the shift work paradigm was checked. And here again, we see the dramatic decrease, simply changing the lightning schedule. And so this is actually the model how we can understand the connection between cell cycle regulation and the circadian clock. So we have sympathetic activation in a daily rhythm of all peripheral tissues, which signals the central timing signals from the SCN, and this synchronizes also the peripheral clocks in the tissues. So actually these both effects, the extracellular effects, the circulating effects, and the molecular effects in the cells have direct links with anti-tumor pathways and pro-proliferative pathways as well. And this is just a funny picture showing the interconnectedness of the cell cycle control and the circadian cycle. This is simply showing that the circadian clock genes activate some key proteins of cell cycle control in a daily rhythm. So these are listed up here with the DNA repair mechanism linked the protein XPA or CMYC or P21 and V1. So these are very important genes in cell cycle control. And they have a daily rhythmic pattern driven by the circadian genes. And on the other side, the DNA damage repair systems that have also a direct connection with the clock genes. So we have a very nice mechanism to correct the DNA mismatch, which occur every day, every minute in our cells because of the metabolic changes or because of exposures to higher levels of reactive oxygen species and so on. So we have a very good system to correct these problems, these DNA damages. And actually, one of these key proteins involved in this mechanism has also daily rhythm. And in this experiment, a special strain of mice which have no hair, so nude mice actually, were exposed to UV radiation in 2 animal groups. One, and the difference was only in the timing again. So one animal group had the exposure in the morning and the other in the evening. And the average number of tumors per mouse were measured, and then the tumor-free survival, and also the tumor diameter, average tumor diameter was measured, and in both aspects there was a clear difference. So the same strain, the same amount, or the same type of exposure, only the timing was different. So that was a proof for that the DNA nucleotide excision repair mechanism have also daily rhythm in their optimal function. And then turning to human studies, clinical biopsies have been observed in many types of tumors for the rate of expression of clock genes in the tumor compared to the surrounding tissues. And this table is summarizing the results of many studies for each genes. And here we see that most of the studies there is a decrease of clock gene expression in the tumor tissue itself. We have been involved in one of these studies in human melanoma clinical samples in the last 2 years, and in these samples we compared the expression of clock protein and clock mRNAs in malignant melanoma biopsies, and also in non-malignant melanocytic lesions like nevi. So what we have found here in this histological specimen, the histological picture of the tumor compared with the surrounding tissue which didn't contain tumor cells, that we had more these dark spots represent the presence of clock protein in these keratinocytes, but around the tumor, in the keratinocytes or in the tumor cells, we have seen much less amount of these proteins present. In comparison with the non-malignant tumor, which is the nevus in the skin, we have seen again a similar difference, that more dark brownish spots we can see here. Then on the other side, these spots, the cell nuclei are more just blue, which shows that they were not stained for the antibody binding. So, but in total, we can see that if there was no malignancy, we still had the difference between the two tissues. But if we compare the two, so the malignant lesion with the non-malignant lesion, we have found that much higher number of immune positivity, much higher number of cells contain the clock protein, both actually in the tumor, maybe not so clear, but around the tumor. So that was something which was against the hypothesis that the clock would function lower in the tumors. And here what we can see also both on mRNA and protein levels, that in the malignant lesion there is an increased expression of 2 different clock genes, but this increase is found not in the tumor itself but around. And this means that actually the metabolic surrounding area of the tumor changes because of malignancy, which can have an effect on the timing of metabolism of these cells, but we don't know more consequences of this, or more speculations we can't do in this moment of the study. The other important point on the effect of the body clock on tumor biology is that if the circadian rhythms of the body clock are not synchronized and the tumor is already present, the tumor grows much quicker and much more aggressive. So in this study, mice were given tumor cells. So actually tumor was growing, was given to mice to let them grow in these animals, and the light-dark conditions have been changed to like a shift work paradigm, or in the control group normal light-dark cycles. And what they have found that it has significantly increased tumor malignity, and also it reduced survival. So the irregular timing, irregular schedule, in this case actually it was a constant light which was used, which is also a very, especially in mice, a very irregular lighting schedule. So that emphasized the importance of taking into account endogenous rhythmicity and limiting melatonin administration to the subjective night in order to restrict melanoma progression. Again, a human study was conducted about the 24-hour pattern of cortisol. If the pattern of the cortisol secretion shows any change, if it's related to higher incidence of tumor. And they have found that flattening of the diurnal cortisol rhythm predicts early lung cancer death. So this means the function of the circadian clock actually is related to the outcome of tumor. Maybe not always to the incidence of tumor, but the outcome. So if already a tumor disease is apparent, then how the disease will progress. And finally, here I have selected an article about a similar study which was in the movie as well, about the chemotherapy, timing of chemotherapy on colon cancer with liver metastasis. In this study, the patients had inoperable liver metastasis of colon cancer, but they have been selected for chemotherapy to reduce the tumor mass, and in the hope of reducing it to a size where it can be operated and removed from the body, and by this increasing the survival. What the special part was here, that the chemotherapy was actually a combination of different treatments, and one of the treatments was these chronomodulated irinotecan administration. This is one chemotherapeutic agent which has already been rigorously studied for which is the proper time point to give, and already personalized indications have been done for this. So in this study, they use this chronomodulated therapy, and what they have found that, for example, here we can see that there is a huge tumor, and after the chemotherapy, the tumor has almost disappeared, so it just shrinks pretty much, and the operation could be done. And in this graph we can see that using this, so simply the surgery is how important the surgery is, you can see here. So those patients who could be operated because of reduced tumor mass, they had a much better survival. Okay. And the last part is about the relation of the body clock to mood disorders. It's well known that under chronodisruption disruption, there are changes in the mood level. So we all know that jet lag is not a fun, also from the aspect of mood. We know that shift work is associated with higher incidence of mood-related disorders, and that's also true for social jet lag. There is a more chronic example in the affective disorder spectrum, which is called seasonal affective disorder or winter depression, which is a very common type of mood disorder. The newest estimates or newest statistics show that about 10% of the population living in temperate latitudes suffer from this condition, which means that during winter, as we have shorter days and later sunrise, that is causing the depressive symptoms, which are listed here: carbohydrate craving, lethargy, fatigue, and sadness. So we know that also shift work is related to higher incidence, even for major depressive disorders. So during and after shift work, so these associations have been already known for several decades, actually. The major hallmarks of major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder are actually related to circadian patterns of abnormal sleep-wake, appetite, and social rhythms. So these are diagnostic criterion, so also for these disorders. Depression symptoms are also diurnal, with the most severe symptoms occurring typically in the morning. And we also know that in the northern countries there is a higher incidence for depression, which receive little sunlight for longer periods of the year. And recently it has been shown that the severity of unipolar depression and circadian misalignment is apparent, the link between the two. And what is also a very interesting, but we already know that from the medical practice, that shifts, the resetting and stabilization of these rhythms produced by psychiatric treatments for mood disorders are important for the efficacy of the treatment itself. Now I have already shown you this picture. This is just to show the molecular links between mood disorders and the components, the molecular components of the clocks, of the circadian clock. So many clock genes are related to sleep homeostasis regulation, or are involved somehow in the sleep regulation. And for example, clock has been shown association with mania. And also, what is very interesting, some alleles of PER2, or PER2 mutations have been shown to be apparent in a sleep disorder called familial advanced sleep phase disorder, which is actually a genetical variant with a higher risk for depressive symptoms and higher risk for metabolic disease, and also higher risk for cancer. The other important point is that mood disorders are very often linked with metabolic disorders. They are both metabolic disorders and also mood disorders are strongly associated with the normal sleep-wake schedule. So they are very frequently comorbid syndromes. Several of the circulating peptides that regulate the food intake or satiety have a daily rhythm in the blood, and actually the brain areas responsible for mood regulation have receptors for these hormones as well. Most of these gut-brain peptides, these hormones, have a circadian rhythm in their expression, and this rhythm is disrupted in a special mutant of the molecular clock, which is called the clock delta 19 mutant mice, described in the 90s. There is one drawback in the research of depression. The animal models are not so good, actually, because most laboratory strains of mice have a deficient melatonin system, which is important, which would be important actually in the regulation of photoperiod dependent physiology, which can be linked to mood as well. Therefore, it's a little bit drawback, but scientists have turned to other types of animals, other types of mice or other mice of rodents, which are actually diurnal. They are active during the day like the man, and not like the laboratory mice, which are active during the night. And the experiments were like the following. So they got 6 weeks. They had 6 weeks in a very short photoperiod, so like winter time, about 5 hours light, and the rest of the day was darkness. And it increased in depression-like behavior, which can be measured in a special test like a force swim test. The mice are placed in a tank of water, and they have to swim there, or they present actually behavior to find a way out, so they start actively swimming or not. If they don't swim, they don't die actually, so they can float on the water. There happens nothing, but by this we can see if the activity of the animals, if they to escape from the situation. And this kind of behavior is much lower in animals which we think produce symptoms of depression. So in these experiments, it is quite clear in many different types of animal models that if we mimic the winter type lightning conditions, these animals will be less active to escape from this water tank, like in depression. And the other well-established therapy is the light exposure, so light treatment with an intensive light exposure after lights on, which means the animals had a winter type of schedule, 5 hours light, and after the first hour of the normal background light, they switched on more intensive light. And this was actually 1 hour exposure for this was effective to reduce anxiety-related and depression-related behavior in these animal models. The other important link between the body clock and the mood disorders is that many of the applied medications in this disorder spectrum have direct phase-advancing effect on the circadian clock itself. So, for example, the morning bright light therapy advances, it speeds up the clock a little bit. Or the SSRI drugs, one of the most common medications used, they have also a direct effect on the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which actually have serotonin receptors. And by this medication has direct effect on the circadian clock to speed that up. The other one is a melatonin agonist molecule, which has also effect on serotonin receptors. It's called agomelatin, which has been shown in animals again to, if given in specific times of the day, it can speed up the body clock. And the other spectrum of treatment types are total sleep deprivation, which actually, in combination with other types of treatments, can again affect the body clock. So the conclusion of these studies were that phase advances in rhythms are antidepressant in their effect and likely involve modulation of suprachiasmatic nucleus activity through interactions with the serotonin or the melatonin systems. What is also clear that the rhythm stabilization can be effective in controlling mood-related episodes, particularly in bipolar patients, which is also well known from the praxis of psychiatric specialty. What is very important, interpersonal and social rhythm therapy has been developed to help control the sleep-wake, work, and social schedules of individuals with bipolar disorder, and this helps to stabilize their mood, which means simply for for the everyday, it means that people who have more social connections, more people who live with good family relations and friends, their schedule is probably stick to each other, or somehow there are more interactions to force a regular schedule, and that can be beneficial on mood as well. Here we see something strange in the entrainment of the rhythm of mood disorder models about methamphetamine. So interestingly, in animals where the suprachiasmatic nucleus is just lesioned, so actually switched off, in those animals, methamphetamine can still entrain the body clock, which means there are other oscillators, other clock components in the brain which drive behavioral rhythms. And unfortunately, right now, this part of the science is not yet advanced to present a better tool, because methamphetamine is, of course, highly addictive, so it cannot be used for human. But in animal models, that's a very important finding, that there may be other brain areas which could be synchronized somehow, which have more effect or more direct connection with mood regulatory parts of the brain. These novel antidepressant agomelatine can be also a good component, although I'm not pharmacologist or I'm not a specialist in this field, but according to literature, this component can do phase entrainment of the body clock, but only through the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So to sum up the links between the body clock and the mood disorders, the major mood and reward-related circuits of the brain have their own endogenous rhythms that are organized by the suprachiasmatic nucleus. They're synchronized or orchestrated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but can be desynchronized from the SN under certain conditions. And the individual circadian genes play key roles in these mood-related circuits in not only regulating activity over 24 hours, but also in the short-term synchronization of neuronal firing between brain structures. And finally, to a synchronization between these different brain circuits of mood-related brain parts, peptides and hormones related to mood and appetite regulation can be an important tool to maintain a healthy mood. Actually, that's the end of my presentation. Last year, I had the privilege to work in Japan in a research laboratory for 6 months on a seasonal affective disorder to find out another new model of seasonal affective disorder in animal models. But the results are not yet to be published, so I can't share the results, but there were good results, promising results of that on another mice strain. So thank you for the attention, and if you have questions, then I'm here.